The bus ride begins. The night was colder than I expected. A sharp wind cut across the empty street as I stood waiting for the bus, clutching my jacket tighter around me. Midnight buses always felt different, slower, heavier somehow, but that night there was something else in the air, something I couldn't quite name. When the bus finally came into view, I felt a wave of relief. Its headlights glared like tired eyes, and the engine growled as it pulled up beside me. It looked old, too old to still be running. The paint was chipped, the windows streaked with grime, and the door creaked like it hadn't been oiled in years. The driver didn't greet me when I stepped inside. He didn't even look at me. His cap was pulled low, shadowing his face. Without a word, he gave a small, stiff nod, and I tapped my fare card on the scanner. Instead of the usual cheerful beep, a strange, distorted groan came from the machine, like metal grinding on metal. I froze for a second, but the driver didn't react, so I forced myself to move down the aisle. The bus was nearly empty. A few passengers sat scattered across the seats, silent, motionless, their faces half hidden in the shadows. I chose a spot in the middle, close enough to the driver to feel safe, but not so close that I seemed nervous. As the bus pulled away from the stop, I glanced at the passengers again. None of them moved. No one adjusted their bag, coughed, or even shifted in their seat. They all sat perfectly still, like statues. I told myself they were just exhausted, late-night travelers who had drifted off, but even then, people move when they sleep. These didn't. The bus groaned as it turned onto a long stretch of road. I leaned against the window, hoping the passing city lights would distract me. But as the minutes went by, the view outside grew emptier. Buildings gave way to cracked, deserted streets. Street lamps flickered, and in some places, whole blocks were swallowed in darkness. I frowned, pulling out my phone to check the time and GPS. But the screen glitched, lines running across it before it went black. I pressed the power button, again and again, but it refused to turn on. My stomach tightened. My phone had been fine just minutes ago. I looked back at the driver. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his face still hidden under the cap. I opened my mouth to ask if this was the right route, but the words caught in my throat. Something about him, the rigid way he sat, the unnatural stillness of his shoulders, made me stay silent. A low hum filled the bus, blending with the growl of the engine. At first, I thought it was mechanical, but then I realized it was something else. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I held my breath and listened closer. It was coming from the back. A slow, steady sound, like a whisper dragging along the walls. My chest tightened, and I turned my head slowly, as if I already knew what I'd see. In the farthest seat, where the shadows swallowed the light, someone was sitting alone. A tall, thin figure, almost too tall to fit comfortably in the seat. I couldn't see their face, only the outline of a body leaning forward, head tilted in my direction. I froze. Had they been there when I got on? I tried to remember, but my mind blurred. The rows of still passengers, the strange sound of the fare machine, all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The whispering grew louder. My skin prickled as if invisible fingers were brushing against the back of my neck. I looked at the other passengers for reassurance, but none of them moved. Their eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking, their expressions empty. I wanted to get up to tell the driver to stop, to get off at the next corner. But the windows outside showed nothing now, just blackness, like the bus was driving through a void. No streets, no buildings, no signs of life. My pulse hammered in my ears. I gripped the seat in front of me, forcing myself to breathe. And then, from the back of the bus, the figure shifted. Its head tilted further, impossibly far, until it was almost upside down, still staring at me. That was when I realized something I couldn't deny anymore. This wasn't just a bus ride. I was trapped inside something I didn't understand. The road that shouldn't exist, the bus kept moving, but it didn't feel like we were driving through the city anymore. Outside the windows, the familiar glow of streetlights and neon signs had disappeared. Instead, there was only blackness stretching endlessly in every direction. No buildings, no trees, no signs of life. I pressed my face closer to the glass, hoping to catch even a glimpse of something, a passing car, a billboard, anything to remind me I was still in my world. But there was nothing. Just an empty road floating in the dark, like the bus was traveling through some kind of void. My chest tightened. Wait. This wasn't right. I reached for my phone again, praying it would flicker back to life, but the screen stayed dead. I shoved it into my pocket and tried to focus on the driver. Maybe he could explain. "Excuse me," I called, my voice cracking louder than I intended. "Where are we going?" The driver didn't answer. His hands never left the wheel. His head never turned. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the low growl of the engine. But then, I realized it wasn't just the engine anymore. There was another sound, faint scratching, like nails dragging slowly along metal. It started from the back of the bus and moved forward, scraping along the walls. My heart pounded. I forced myself to turn around. The figure in the back was gone. I blinked, scanning the rows of seats. Empty. Too empty. My breath caught as I realized the other passengers, motionless ones who had been sitting quietly when I first got on, they were gone too. Every seat was empty, except mine and the driver's. My body froze. I hadn't heard anyone leave. The bus hadn't stopped once since we pulled away from the station. Where had they gone? I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me. The aisle stretched out before me, dim lights flickering overhead. Every step I took echoed too loudly, like the bus itself was amplifying the sound. I reached one of the abandoned seats and touched the fabric. Cold, damp almost. Then I noticed something on the headrest. Fingerprints. Yes, long, dark smears, as though someone with wet hands had dragged their fingers across the seat. My stomach twisted. I pulled my hand back quickly, wiping it against my jacket as if the stain might crawl onto my skin. The scratching sound came again, louder this time, closer. I spun toward the back. The last row of seats was empty, but the shadows seemed thicker there, darker than they should have been. Something moved inside the blackness. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I clutched the pole in the aisle just to keep myself upright. "Stop the bus," I shouted at the driver, my voice breaking with panic. "Stop now." Finally, he reacted. His head turned slowly, unnaturally slow, until I could see his face. I wish I hadn't looked. His skin was gray, stretched tight over his bones, and his mouth was twisted into a permanent grin that didn't belong on any living person. Worst of all were his eyes, or rather the gaping holes where his eyes should have been. Two hollow sockets stared straight through me, deeper than darkness itself. My knees buckled, and I gripped the pole tighter to stop myself from collapsing. He turned back to the road as if nothing had happened, the bus continuing its endless path through the void. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw myself against the doors, the windows, anything to get out. But when I glanced at the exit, my blood turned to ice. The figure was standing there, tall, thin, its head bent at an unnatural angle, almost brushing the ceiling of the bus. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of a body that seemed to ripple with the shadows around it. It didn't move. It just stood there, blocking the only way out. The scratching sound returned, but this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the floor, right beneath my feet. The still passengers, the scratching under the floor grew louder, as though something or someone was crawling beneath the bus, dragging its claws against the metal. Every vibration traveled up through my shoes, rattling the bones in my legs. I gripped the pole so tightly that my nails dug into my palm. The tall figure at the door hadn't moved. It just stood there, its head cocked at that impossible angle, blocking my escape. The only sound was the scratching beneath me and the steady growl of the engine. Then, all at once, the scratching stopped. The silence was almost worse. I forced myself to look around, trying to calm my racing thoughts. That's when I saw them, the passengers. They were back. Every seat that had been empty before was filled again. Men, women, even a child or two, all of them, sitting exactly as I remembered when I first got on. Their eyes stared straight ahead, glassy and lifeless, as if nothing had changed. My heart dropped. I knew they hadn't been there a moment ago. I knew it. I had walked down the aisle and touched the cold, empty seats, yet here they were. I took a shaky step toward, one of them a man in a wrinkled suit sitting 2 rows ahead of me. "Hey," I whispered, reaching out to touch his shoulder. The instant my hand brushed the fabric of his jacket, His head snapped toward me. Not slowly, not like a normal person turning. It was sudden, violent, like his neck had been wrenched by invisible hands. His eyes locked on mine, hollow and unblinking. His lips moved, opening and closing as though trying to form words, but only a dry, rasping breath came out. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the seat. My chest tightened, and a scream clawed at the back of my throat, but I forced it down. If I screamed, I knew something worse would happen. The other passengers began to move. Not naturally. Their heads jerked and twisted, their bodies stiff, like puppets pulled by tangled strings. Some bent forward, some leaned back, but their eyes, all of them, shifted to me. Dozens of glassy stares pinning me in place. I pressed myself against the pole, my nails digging into the metal. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice shaking. For a moment, there was no answer. Just the low hum of the bus, the flickering lights above, and the suffocating silence of their stares. Then, slowly, a sound began to spread through the bus. Whispers, faint at first like the rustling of dry leaves, then louder. Hissing, overlapping voices, spilling from every frozen mouth. The words were jumbled, distorted, impossible to understand, but they carried a weight that sank into my chest. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The whispers weren't just sound, they were inside me, crawling under my skin, worming into my head. "Stop," I begged, my knees giving way. I slid down against the seat, pressing myself into the corner. "Please, stop." The whispers cut off instantly. I dared to look up. Every passenger was silent again, their faces blank, their eyes dead. Except one, the child. She sat near the front, her small hands clutching a faded teddy bear.
Hey, slowly.
Unnaturally slowly, she turned in her seat until she was facing me. Unlike the others, her eyes weren't glassy. They were dark, too dark, pools of black that seemed endless. When she opened her mouth, I expected more whispers. But what came out was a single word: run. The lights overhead flickered violently, buzzing like angry insects. I blinked, and the girl was gone. The seat she had been sitting in was empty again. I shot to my feet, my chest heaving. Eyes darted to the driver, but he hadn't moved. Still gripping the wheel, still staring ahead with those hollow sockets, and the figure at the door. It was closer now. It's no longer standing in the shadows at the far end, but halfway down the aisle, still tall, still thin, still tilted. Its presence pressed against me like a storm. My instincts screamed to run, but the girl's voice echoed in my head. Run. But where could I run? The road outside was nothing but endless black, and I was still on the bus. Trapped. The stranger in the shadows, the bus lights flickered again, and for a split second, everything plunged into darkness. When they came back on, the figure had moved even closer. Just a few rows behind me now. My throat tightened. It hadn't walked. I hadn't heard a single step. It had simply shifted forward, like the shadows themselves had carried it closer. I forced my eyes away, praying that if I didn't look at it, maybe it wouldn't move again. My pulse pounded so hard, I could feel it in my fingertips. The passengers were all frozen once more, staring ahead as if nothing had happened. But I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, like the entire bus was holding its breath. I stood, legs trembling, and staggered toward the front. My only thought was the driver. If anyone could get me out of this nightmare, it had to be him even, if his eyeless face still haunted me. But the closer I got to the front, the stronger the air seemed to grow. Heavier, colder, like I was walking into a freezer. The overhead lights dimmed with each step, buzzing faintly as if straining to stay alive. Finally, I reached the thin barrier between me and the driver. "Stop the bus," shouted, slamming my palm against the glass partition. "Please stop." The driver didn't move. His hands were fused to the wheel, veins bulging against gray skin. Slowly, his head tilted to the side, creaking like old wood. He didn't look at me, but his mouth stretched open into that same awful grin. Wide, too wide. My chest heaved. I slammed the glass again, harder this time. Let me off. The grin never wavered, and then I saw it. In the reflection of the front windshield, the figure was standing directly behind me. I spun, heart leaping into my throat, but the aisle was empty. The seats, however, were not. Every single passenger had turned to face me. Dozens of heads twisted at impossible angles, eyes wide and black, their jaws slack. One by one, they began to stand, not smoothly, but in jerky, unnatural movements like broken dolls. The whispering started again. This time, it was louder, clearer. Stay. Stay with us. Don't leave. The voices overlapped, male and female, adult and child, all rising into a distorted chorus that rattled the walls of the bus. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I backed toward the front, pressing myself against the partition. The driver didn't move. The figure was nowhere to be seen, but the passengers. They were closing in, their feet dragging against the floor, their bodies twitching as though pulled by invisible strings. I had nowhere to run. The only option left was the emergency exit window. My eyes darted to it, a squared pane of glass with a red handle. Without thinking, I scrambled toward it, shoving past the advancing passengers. My fingers wrapped around the handle, yanking with all my strength. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, panic rising in my chest. The whispers grew deafening, pressing into my skull until I thought my head might split in two. My vision blurred, spots of light exploding at the edges. Then silence. Everything stopped. I froze, my hands still gripping the exit handle. The whispers vanished. The passengers stood motionless, their heads all turned toward me, their black eyes unblinking. And from the very back of the bus, where the shadows pooled darkest, the figure emerged again. This time, I could see more of it. It was tall and naturally, Talid's head nearly scraping the ceiling. Its limbs were impossibly long, its fingers tapering into sharp, bony points. The shadows clung to it, swallowing its features. But as it stepped closer, I caught glimpses of a face, not a human face. Something stretched too thin, skin pulled tight over bone, mouth curved into a smile that mirrored the driver's. It moved slowly this time, one deliberate step after another. The passengers parted silently, creating a path down the aisle. Every instinct screamed at me to escape, but my body wouldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my chest locked in a cage of terror. The figure stopped just a few feet away, tilting its head down to meet mine. I still couldn't see its eyes, but I felt them. Cold, endless, burning straight through me. And then, in a voice that was not a whisper, but a growl, it spoke. "You are not supposed to be here." When the driver turned his head, my blood froze at the sound of its voice. The words weren't just spoken, they vibrated through the air, through my bones, echoing inside my skull. My knees trembled as I tried to take a step back, but the partition behind me blocked my retreat. The figure loomed over me, its smile stretching impossibly wide, its long fingers twitching as though eager to reach out. The passengers stood frozen, heads tilted at odd angles, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The silence after that voice was unbearable, pressing into my ears until I thought I would scream, and then the bus lurched. The sudden jolt threw me against the partition. Figure staggered slightly, though its smile never faltered. I snapped my head toward the front straight at the driver. For the first time, he moved. Slowly, mechanically, his head began to turn. At first I thought he was going to glance at me the way any driver might check on a passenger. But the turning didn't stop. His neck twisted further, bones cracking with every degree, until his head rotated a full 180 degrees, his face staring directly at me. Those hollow sockets locked onto mine, and then he blinked. The empty black pits pulsed, and in that darkness, I saw something moving. Shapes. Shadows swirling as though alive, writhing and twisting in the void of his eyes. I gasped, stumbling back only to collide with the figure still looming over me. Its long fingers grazed my shoulder, sending a freezing shock through my body, like ice water had poured into my veins. I tried to wrench away, but my muscles seized, trembling violently under its touch. The driver's grin widened to match the figure's, his lips stretched, tearing at the corners, revealing teeth that weren't teeth at all but jagged shards, glinting like broken glass. The bus engine roared louder, the whole vehicle shuddering as it barreled down the endless black road. Outside, the darkness seemed to press closer, clawing at the windows as though trying to seep inside. I whispered, shaking my head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The figure leaned closer, its face inches from mine. I could smell it now, rot, damp earth, and something sour that made bile rise in my throat. Its mouth opened slowly, creaking like rusted hinges, and inside I saw nothing but an endless void. Suddenly, the passengers moved again. All at once, every head turned toward the front, toward the driver. Their jaws opened in unison, and a sound erupted from them, a piercing wail. Shrill and broken, like dozens of radios, all tuned to static. The noise shook the bus, rattling the windows, stabbing into my ears until tears spilled down my face. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block it out. But no matter how tightly I pressed my hands against my ears, the sound dug deeper, echoing inside my skull. Through the chaos, I heard a laugh. A low, guttural laugh that came from both the driver and the figure at once, their voices overlapping perfectly. The driver's head, still twisted unnaturally backward, began to tilt. Slowly, deliberately, until his gaze shifted toward the empty space beyond me. I followed his eyeless stare. At the very back of the bus, a door I hadn't noticed before stood wide open. A faint red glow spilled from it, pulsing like a heartbeat. The aisle stretched toward it, and the passengers stepped aside again, forming a perfect path leading me straight to it. The whispers returned, layered beneath the static wails. Go through, it's waiting." I staggered to my feet, every instinct warring inside me. Part of me screamed to run, to hurl myself through that door if it meant escaping this nightmare. But another part, stronger, colder, knew whatever waited on the other side wasn't salvation. I turned back to the driver, desperate. "Where are you taking me?" I shouted, my voice breaking. For the first time, his mouth moved in sync with his words, to the last stop. The figure's long fingers brushed against my back, nudging me toward the glowing door. And the bus did not slow down. The whispers that followed the red glow pulsed at the back of the bus, like a beating heart calling me closer. Every step I took felt heavier, as though invisible chains dragged at my legs. My breath came in sharp bursts, fogging in the freezing air that filled the aisle. The whispers grew louder. At first, they were scattered, coming from all sides of the bus, above me, beneath me, even inside me. But as I moved closer to the open door, the voices began to overlap, chanting together in one dreadful rhythm. "It's waiting, it's waiting, it's waiting." The words drilled into my skull, pulling me forward against my will. I wanted to fight it, to turn and run, but the figure's long fingers pressed into the small of my back, guiding me like I was nothing more than a puppet. I glanced at the passengers. Their mouths still hung open, but the static wail had gone. Instead, their heads twitched in short, jerky movements, as though every bone in their necks had splintered. Their eyes never left me. One of them moved. It was a woman near the front, her skin waxy and gray like melted candle wax. She slowly lifted a trembling arm and pointed at the glowing doorway. Her fingers shook, but the message was clear. "Go." My heart hammered in my chest. I wanted to scream at her to demand answers, but my throat had gone dry, my voice stolen by the weight of terror pressing against me. The bus jolted again, throwing me forward. I stumbled, catching myself on the back of a seat. The seat felt wrong, wet, sticky. I pulled my hand back, and in the faint glow, I saw it was smeared with something dark. Blood. Oil. I didn't know, and I didn't want to. The whispers shifted. It's no longer chanting in unison. They became individualized, again different voices, layered one on top of the other. Some I recognized, my mother's voice, my best friend's laugh, my own voice. Hearing myself whisper from somewhere in the shadows made bile rise in my throat. The words were soft but unmistakable. "Come closer. You don't have a choice." I froze. The figure behind me pressed harder, its claw-like hand digging into my back. A sharp sting spread from where it touched me, like venom seeping into my bloodstream. My knees buckled, and I nearly collapsed, but the bus lurched once more, throwing me closer to the door. The red glow brightened, filling the bus like liquid fire. The aisle stretched unnaturally long, the door always seeming just out of reach no matter how far I walked. The whispers became frantic now, overlapping, clashing, their tones sharp and urgent. "Go now. It's too late. Run, run, run. Don't look back. Don't look back." The command hit me harder than the others. which meant of course I turned. The driver's head was still twisted backward, his empty sockets locked onto me. But now he was standing. His crooked frame rose slowly from the driver's seat, his bones cracking with each unnatural movement. His arms dangled too long, fingers brushing against the floor as he stepped into the aisle. He didn't walk, he glided, his legs dragged, lifeless, as though pulled by invisible strings. His jagged grin split his face in two, blood dripping down his chin, staining the collar of his uniform, and he was coming toward me. The figure at my back leaned down, its mouth grazing my ear. Its voice was a rasp, like nails on glass. "He is not the last passenger." I spun, desperate to see its face, but it was gone. The air behind me was empty, though the chill of its touch lingered. The driver's pace quickened, his movements jerky but relentless. The passengers swayed in unison, their heads snapping side to side like broken dolls. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. I ran, sprinted down the aisle, ignoring the way the bus seemed to stretch longer with every step. My lungs burned, my heart screamed in my chest, but I didn't stop. The red glow grew blinding, filling my vision until it was all I could see.
Oh?
And then I crossed the threshold. The moment I stepped through the glowing door, the whispers stopped. The wailing, the chanting, the suffocating presence of the passengers, it all vanished. Silence. I blinked against the searing light, struggling to see where I was. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, though it pulsed faintly, like the surface of something alive. I dared a single glance back. The bus was gone. Only the red glow remained, and endless void stretching in every direction, swallowing me whole. And in that suffocating silence, I heard one final whisper. But this time it came from directly inside my head. "Shouldn't have left." The last stop approaches. The silence was worse than the whispers. At least the voices, as horrifying as they were, meant I wasn't truly alone. Now there was nothing, no sound, no movement, not even the hum of the bus engine I'd grown sick of. Just me, standing in a red-lit void that seemed to stretch forever. The ground beneath my feet throbbed faintly, rising and falling like the pulse of a giant heart. Every beat reverberated through my bones, making my teeth chatter. I crouched low, pressing my hand against the surface. It was warm, alive. I yanked my hand back. My chest tightened. Where am I? My voice came out small, swallowed instantly by the void. No echo, nothing answered me. I turned, searching for the door I had stepped through, but it was gone. The bus was gone. Everything behind me had melted into the endless glow. Panic set in. I stumbled forward, picking a direction at random, my footsteps echoing only inside my skull. The air here was heavy, thick, each breath burning my throat. My legs trembled with each step, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stand still, not here. After what felt like hours or maybe seconds, time didn't feel right. Here I saw something ahead. Got a shape. It was a signpost. Just standing there in the middle of nothing, a crooked wooden post with a rusted metal sign bolted to it. My heart skipped. Finally something. I quickened my pace, nearly tripping as I rushed toward it. The closer I came, the more the letters scratched into the sign came into focus. At first, I thought they were in another language. Strange symbols, jagged and twisted. But as I blinked, they shifted, rearranging themselves into words I could understand. Last stop. My stomach dropped. I shook my head, stepping back. No, this isn't possible. But the ground beneath me pulsed harder, faster, matching the quickening of my heartbeat. It was as if the place itself was excited, feeding on my fear. A sound broke the silence. At first faint, a low hum. But it grew louder, deeper, vibrating through the void until it rattled my ribs. My blood ran cold as I recognized it, the sound of an engine. The bus. I whipped around and there it was. The same bus I'd left behind, emerging from the red glow as if it had always been there. Its headlights pierced through the void, blinding. The roar of its engine filled the air, the familiar grinding and rattling shaking the ground beneath me. But it wasn't moving on the road, it was floating, hovering above the glowing surface, sliding forward without wheels touching anything, and it was coming straight for me. I froze, unable to move as it drew closer. The windshield reflected only the glow, but as it neared, I saw movement inside. The driver still stood in the aisle, his twisted grin fixed, his eyeless sockets locked on me. The passengers sat motionless again, their heads tilted, waiting for me. No, my voice cracked. I won't get back on. The bus screeched to a halt in front of me, the doors hissing open. The red glow inside was blinding, spilling out like blood. I took a step back, but the signpost behind me groaned and shifted. The wood bent, splintering, twisting around my shoulders like hands pushing me forward. I struggled against it, thrashing, but the sign wrapped tighter, splinters digging into my skin. The hum of the engine deepened into a growl. From the open doorway, the whispers returned. Louder now, more insistent. Bored. Bored. It's the last stop. The driver moved closer, stepping down the aisle toward the open doors. His body cracked and jerked with each movement, but he didn't falter. He raised one long, skeletal arm and gestured, beckoning me inside. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The ground pulsed violently now, like a heart about to burst. The signpost's wooden fingers shoved me forward, closer to the open doors. My legs buckled as I resisted, but the pressure was too strong. I stumbled, falling to my knees just inches from the steps. The whispers crescendoed, so loud they became a roar inside my head. Last stop, last stop, last stop. The driver's jagged grin widened as he leaned down, his empty sockets inches from my face. And then, for the first time, he spoke without distortion, without overlapping voices. Just one, hollow and clear, "Welcome home." The final passenger, his words, "Welcome home," echoed in my skull, each syllable dripping with finality. Home? This place wasn't home. It couldn't be. My chest tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing the air out of me. My body trembled, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from his hollow sockets. They weren't just empty anymore. Deep inside them, I saw movement shadows swirling, reaching, beckoning. The driver straightened, his long arm still extended, urging me toward the bus. Behind him, the passengers sat in perfect silence, their hollow stares locked on me. Not one of them blinked. Not one of them moved. Yet I could feel their hunger, like they were waiting for me to fill something. Some absence. I tried to scramble backward, but the ground beneath me throbbed violently, buckling like a living thing. It heaved upward, tossing me forward onto the bottom step of the bus. The wood from the signpost clamped around my waist, shoving me higher. No, let me go. My scream tore from my throat, raw and desperate. But the bus took me. The instant my foot hit the first step, the door slammed shut behind me with a metallic hiss that shook the entire vehicle. The air inside was thicker than before, suffocating. It smelled of rust, mold, and something older like the air of a tomb sealed for centuries. The passengers turned in unison. Their heads jerked, their eyes all black voids snapping to meet mine. My stomach churned as every jaw unhinged, stretching wide in a grotesque parody of welcome. I spun to the doors, slamming my fists against them, but they wouldn't budge. The driver returned to his seat, his movements smooth now, deliberate, as though he no longer needed to pretend to be human. He wrapped his hands around the wheel, long fingers curling like claws. The engine roared. The bus lurched forward. "No, I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to be here." I shouted, my voice cracking. A whisper brushed against my ear. "Close, too close. You do now." I whipped around, but no one was beside me. The sound had come from everywhere, from the very air. My knees buckled, and I fell into one of the seats. It was warm. Too warm. I shot up instantly, gagging, as I realized the fabric was slick, damp. My hand came away stained with something dark. I didn't look too closely. The passengers swayed in unison as the bus rattled forward. Their mouths stretched wider, impossibly wide, until their faces split. Inside, there was no tongue, no throat, only darkness. The driver's voice boomed, not from his mouth, but from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It came from the bus itself. Every journey ends, every seat fills, every road leads. Here I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't help. The words reverberated inside me, deep, crawling through my veins. The bus jerked violently, throwing me against the window. For the first time, I dared to look outside. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. There was no road, no sky, no ground. Only faces. Endless faces stretching in every direction, their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes bulged with terror, their features frozen as if pressed against invisible glass. They weren't moving. They weren't alive. They were trapped. No, no, I whispered, shaking my head as tears burned down my cheeks. The passengers inside the bus leaned closer now, their faces inches from mine. Their mouths gaped wide and the whispers returned, all of them speaking together in a hideous choir. One of us, one of us, one of us. My chest seized, my vision blurred. I stumbled back down the aisle, clawing at the door, but my fingers passed through the handle as if it wasn't solid anymore. And then I realized neither was I. My hands were fading. My skin turned translucent, veins dissolving, bones vanishing. My scream caught in my throat as my reflection flickered faintly in the glass of the door. My face was pale, hollow, melting away until only empty black sockets remained. The bus slowed. The engine growled low as if satisfied. The driver twisted his head back toward me, grin stretching ear to ear. His voice, deep and final, cut through the whispers. Now the bus is full. Darkness swallowed me whole. And I knew then I was the last passenger.